Hi there, Fix That Car here with a piece on how to replace a Vauxhall water pump. This happens to be a Corsa C, it's a late Corsa C, and this engine, or this type of engine, can be found in many Vauxhalls. It's common across the more modern Corsa range. It's also in the Agila and the Tigra. First of all, how do I know that this water pump needs to be replaced? Well, I was doing my weekly checks and I noticed I needed to top up the coolant fluid, only by a cupful, but that has led me to have a look around the engine bay, and the clues are down here, right at the bottom. You can probably see it glistening in the lamp there. There's some fluid, and I'm putting my finger in that fluid and tasting it. If you put it on the tip of your tongue, it tastes sweet, which means it's antifreeze. So fluid has leaked out of the area above. There is also some staining down this side of the engine. That's not quite so easy to see, but it can be seen by holding a mirror down and looking upwards. So almost certainly the water pump has started to leak. We'll have a close look at that as we take it off. So what might have happened had I not been doing my weekly checks and had I not noticed that the coolant level had dropped? Well, actually, the consequences could have been quite catastrophic for this small engine. If it had overheated, the head gasket could have blown, the cylinder head might have warped, and worse than that, the pistons may have even seized. All sorts of things go terribly wrong with an engine when it gets too hot. As a driver, I would probably have noticed that something strange about the temperature gauge in the car and stopped at the roadside. But even there, I'd be stranded by the roadside, which would have been very unpleasant. And had I not noticed and continued, it could have been the end of this little engine. So it is important to do these weekly checks. If your fluid does drop, you might top it up and not be able to find a leak anywhere. If that's the case, just keep on checking it. Check it after your next journey. Check it every week, and make sure that it isn't going down. If it's not been checked for a long time, it might need a top up, and it might be okay. But generally, if there's any movement in the coolant fluid level, there's something going amiss, and there's a leak somewhere that needs to be found and rectified. First thing to do for safety reasons is disconnect the battery. Just place something underneath that so it doesn't contact. The procedure I'm going to go through is first of all drain all of the cooling fluid. There's a little drain cock to the bottom right hand side of the radiator. Just put the container there to catch that in a moment. I'm then going to support the left hand side of the engine and remove that large mounting to the left there. Now I'm lucky here, this is a 3-cylinder engine, so there's plenty of space for me to work down. If you're working on a 4-cylinder Ecotec engine, you'll need to remove the air cleaner and possibly a liner inside the wheel arch to give you good access to the left hand side of the engine bay. After that, I'll release the tensioner, remove the belt and disconnect some of the ancillaries from the water pump before actually unbolting the water pump. This is where things can go wrong, because there are some long bolts through the water pump that don't just support the water pump in place, they also hold the timing cover on the left hand side of the engine. If water's got through to those bolts, they might break if they've rusted, and that will pose a problem. If they do break off, and I hope they don't, I'll have to remove the timing cover off the left hand end of the engine and try and extract the broken end of those bolts. That has happened to me before, and it's not very pleasant, so fingers crossed. Let's hope those bolts come out okay. The drain plug for the radiator is down here. You can just about see it on the camera. It's just a matter of grabbing it with your fingers, twisting it, turning it, and all the fluid will come out. Before draining the coolant, turn the heater control to its maximum. That'll enable the heater matrix to drain out as well. It's one of the places that sludge does build up, so if you're changing coolant fluid, it's a good idea to remove this as well. The engine mount out of the way. This now gives good access to the bits we need to get at. Well, these are all the bits off. This little pipe goes over to the throttle body. This is the coolant sensor. I've taken the thermostat housing off from that pipe. There's another one below which I've also taken off, and one at the back here. Now these pipes are held in place with these spring clips, which can be quite tricky to free, but I've used a pair of long plumber's pliers which I found gave me quite a good grip on those. Now I'm going to undo these various bolts that hold the water pump in place with my fingers crossed and everything else crossed, and hope that they all come out and none of them break. Well, I've been lucky here. This is the water pump off, and these two are the problem bolts. You can see they're long. That's quite damp, and that one has just started to produce a little bit of surface rusting, and it's that rusting that will embed those bolts in their screw holes and cause them to break as you remove this type of water pump. So be very careful around those two particular bolts. Other bolts are still long, but they're more likely to come out okay, and hopefully you'll be as lucky as I have. Now, what's wrong with this? I've taken the trouble to take it off, and I was expecting to see a long stain under here out of the drain hole, but there isn't one. But there is a leak. So, could it have been from the gasket? Possibly. More likely though, the leak has been from this thermostat housing, and looking closely at the mating surfaces, they're not good at all. So I think the leak I've experienced has been from here, down here, and down to the puddle that we saw at the bottom of the engine tray. So really, replacing this pump hasn't been necessary. The whole job could have been a lot simpler had I known where this leak was coming from, which I didn't do. Anyhow, no harm done, and a new pump going on the car. Let's have a look at what's in the box. So here we have a new gasket and a new thermostat housing gasket, which is great. Some instructions. And a pump, which looks pretty good to me. So I'll move this temperature sensor across. I'm going to clean up all those pipes. I shall clean this housing up to make sure I get a good seal, and we'll start to reassemble. The old gasket that came off the old pump is a metal gasket. That's the original gasket. And the replacement is a paper gasket. Now, in order to get a good seal, it's got to take a bead of the silicon sealant around there. This is going to sit on top and locate. Another bead of silicon sealant around the whole lot, and then it'll be bolted onto the side of the engine. So here's a new water pump with its hoses connected, the heater hose, the throttle body hose, the temperature sensor and the two radiator hoses, and it's all bolted down. And here comes the strange bit. I'm now going to leave this for 3 hours. Why, might you ask? The reason I'm going to leave this for 3 hours is it's dry, and the sealant I've used needs 3 hours to skin over and start to go off. Even if I just lower the jack under this engine, I'll splash some water onto the new sealant and it won't do it any good. So it's a good idea, if you can, you might not be able to do this, but if you can, just leave it for 3 hours, come back, and then carry on. For the pulley bolts, it's a drop of thread lock. Just a little spot. You don't want these to fall out while that's spinning and vibrating. Back on with the belt. I'm compressing the tensioner here with just a socket on the end of a wrench. That looks good. Put the engine mounting back in place. Let's put that in. And finally, refill with an antifreeze water mixture. Antifreezes are a bit confusing. They used to be blue, they went pink, and more latterly they're orange. What I do is I use the latest and greatest, which is this orange 5-year antifreeze and deionized water. It's not a great idea to use tap water, and it's well worth going for the 5-year antifreeze because that'll last that much longer in your cooling system. Once you've got as much coolant as is necessary to get up to a maximum mark, leave the cap off and start the engine, and just stand by and top up as the level goes down to the maximum level. Keep on doing this until the engine's warm. Eventually, when it's warmed up, turn off, allow it to cool, put the cap back on, and go for a drive. After that little drive and it's cooled down again, just recheck the level, and of course check through for leaks throughout. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.